The type of questions we ask ourselves can dictate so much about our lives. And two of the most damaging ones that I hear people say is, why can't I do this? And what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this will automatically lead you towards all the ways in which you can't. And what's wrong with me? Well, I've got entire videos on what that one does to your brain. But the short answer is nothing good. But I want to share with you a couple of questions that you can implement right now that will cost you nothing except for a little bit of effort and time, no money, and you will start changing the way that you behave almost instantly. See, our brain loves to answer the specifics of a question, so you can do something really simple by changing one word. Right? I'll give you an example of that. If you were to say, what do I want for dinner tonight versus what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Those might sound like the exact same question, right? But what am I going to have will take you more towards if you're, say, trying to lose weight and you're on a diet, or if you're trying to eat more vegetables, if you're trying to just generally eat healthier, you're trying to eat on a budget, what am I going to have will lead you through a flow chart of all those other filters that you've just talked about. Whereas what I want, your brain immediately goes to just the thing that you want. So actually, if you're trying to achieve any of those other things, what do I want isn't exactly a useful question. What do I want might lead you straight to pizza. It leads me to pizza right now. But what am I going to have? What am I going to have that fits my goal? Because that's actually what your brain is filling in when you ask that second question. It's saying within my context, within everything I'm trying to achieve, with where my budget is this week, with what ingredients we have in the fridge, all of those different filters and contexts are getting played through your brain to produce a completely different question than simply, what do I want? Our brains are just utterly fantastic like that. So if you get stuck in that question of why can't I do this, changing that up to how could I do this is absolutely massive. Why can't I do this takes you to all the reasons you can't. How could I do this leads you towards a solution of how you could. And you might only get one answer to how I could do this and 10 answers to why can't I, but that's actually good because you only really want one solution. You only really need one solution, and sometimes having 10 solutions could just be distracting, right? But I want to talk about the two questions that this video is about. That's just a little side note on some bonus stuff of what you can think about, and also just utilize that idea of how could I position questions better to myself? How could I ask myself better questions? Because when I first learned this concept, that was what I started doing. I started thinking of, okay, well, what questions could I ask myself? If our brain goes for very specific outcomes based on the specific words of the question, what are some better questions I could ask? And the two that I love to come back to, which I think absolutely can transform your behavior, you need to do these regularly, you need to do these daily, sometimes multiple times daily. But you ask yourself the following two questions. Number one, what am I trying to achieve? And number two, is what I'm doing right now helping me or hurting me? Two very simple questions, right? But what am I trying to achieve? We often forget what we're trying to achieve. And this can be so many different areas of your life, right? If you're in work right now, it could be, what am I trying to achieve in work? If what you're doing when you ask this question is having an argument with your partner, it can be, what am I trying to achieve in this argument? Going back to that, what am I trying to achieve, stops us from going on our default behaviors, because when we forget what we're trying to achieve, what we do is we just start playing on the default patterns. The patterns that you have been in 100% of the time, or close to 100% of the time. So if in work, you don't ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? You might just spend the day doing busy work, checking the emails, putting out fires, dealing with the reactive work that is right in front of you and putting off the proactive work that might actually really move you forward in that job. So you ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? And then in the argument situation, well, once people get into an argument, what tends to happen is what they were trying to argue over in the first place gets completely forgotten, and what they're trying to achieve in that moment is to win the argument. I've done an entire video on that, and you can find that one over here. When we then stop focusing on what the actual goal is, we go back to those default behaviors, and those default behaviors have left you where you are right now. They have put you in the position that you're in right now, and if you carry on doing them, they're going to keep you right there. Whereas if you ask this question, what am I trying to achieve? It immediately pushes you into thinking what the goal is. And then you follow it up with, is what I'm doing helping or hurting that? If you're trying to achieve, let's say you're trying to achieve more understanding, you're having an argument because you don't like the fact that your partner's not very affectionate towards you anymore. If then you get into the argument and you start just essentially throwing just insult after insult at this person because they've got defensive and all the rest of it, you're not trying to achieve getting your partner to be more affectionate to you. So you want to ask yourself that question, is the way I'm approaching this helping me to get that? If it's an argument with your kids, trying to get them to tidy up their room more, honestly, if you just shout tidy your room 100 times and they've not done it on the first 99, why would you think the 100 times going to work? So instead, you want to then start looking for alternate ways to approach things. And if the way that you're doing it isn't working, it can be so easy for us to immediately just blame the other person. Like, is what I'm doing getting me ahead in my job? No, it must be my boss's fault. Is what I'm doing getting me ahead in this relationship? No, it must be my partner's fault. Is what I'm doing getting me ahead with my children? No, it must be my children's fault. There is 50-50 blame in every situation, but look, we can only ever control ourselves. We can't control anybody else, and we shouldn't really seek to control anybody else, because that's just weird. We can influence other people, but we don't influence them by shouting about their behaviour, about insulting them, about just secretly cursing them under our breath. We influence them by changing us, by doing something different ourselves. So if that same argument isn't getting you where you want to, it's time to try something different. And this is an approach I really love to take on a regular basis, which is to be almost like an experimenter in your own life. It's like, okay, well, if that's not working, let's make a game out of it. Let's try doing this instead. How else could I act? What else could I do to try and get that goal? This is the question that leads on from that. So you check in, what am I trying to achieve? What is the goal? Is my current behavior helping that or hurting it? If it's helping it, crack on, keep going. If it's hurting it, okay, take a pause, go back to this question now. What else could I be doing that would make a bigger impact? How else could I approach this that would make a bigger impact? And if you're not sure, because in a lot of these things we never really are, that's where a bit of trial and error comes in. Try out new things and see, rather than trying the exact same thing over and over again and hoping that this time is going to be the time that the other person gets it. This time is going to be the time that the world changes to meet what you've been putting out there. If doing it 100 times hasn't made that change, doing it 101 isn't going to. So come back to this question regularly throughout the day. Whatever it is you're getting stuck with, what am I trying to achieve? Is what I'm doing helping or hurting? And if it's hurting, how else could I be doing it to get to where I want to be? By using those questions together and then actually doing what comes back in that third one, noting the results, seeing what happens, being playful with it, you'll get so much further than constantly just trying to hit home that same point that you've been working on every minute of your life until you heard this video.